Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you all for joining us as we remember the 9/11 attack 20 years later. Today, we reflect on this somber anniversary with New York City emergency personnel. Today's event is being held in Microsoft Teams meeting. It's important that you all keep your microphones off, and unless you're a panelist or a moderator, keep your cameras off as well. At the end of today's discussion, we will invite the audience to join us for a community conversation, at which point you'll be able to turn them both on when you're asking a question. In the meantime, please feel free to place comments or questions in the chat box. I'll keep an eye out for it. I'll keep an eye on it, pardon me, for our moderator. And today's event is being recorded. At this time, I'll turn today's conversation over to Officer in Charge Nathan Gonyea, who will introduce our moderator.
Thank you, Janet. And I want to thank everyone who has joined us today. This is a really difficult anniversary for our nation and for many of us personally. 20 years ago today, on that what was a very beautiful sunny morning, we lost nearly 3,000 Americans when planes crashed into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Among them were several SUNY Empire students and alumni. Even now, 20 years later, we continue to feel the repercussions of that day, including most recently with the events that have unfolded in Afghanistan, obviously as that war has ended. Among those most affected by the events of 9/11 were the emergency personnel who rushed to the World Trade Center that day to help those who were in peril. Of the 2,977 victims killed in the attacks, 412 were emergency workers in New York City who responded to the World Trade Center, and that included 343 firefighters. Today, we want to explore the effects of the attacks on New York City's emergency services, what has changed, what is still needed. The discussion is really an opportunity for them to remember and reflect on what happened that day. It's also a chance for us to learn how the events of 9/11 changed the way we respond to emergencies, especially those of this magnitude. And I just want to thank all of our panelists today for their service and all they've done to support everyone in New York City with their service to the city. Without further delay, though, I would like to introduce Dr. Cathryn Thurston, an associate professor in our School of Social and Behavioral Sciences. Dr. Thurston is the program director for SUNY Empire's degree in security studies. She also manages SUNY Empire's online courses in emergency management, homeland security, criminal justice, legal studies, and public affairs. So she doesn't manage a lot, it's just one or two things. She has 25 years of national security work experience in the government, industry, and in academia. Her research includes assessing the effectiveness of U.S. national security strategies and plans and the application of social science research methodologies to intelligence and national security. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Dr. Thurston, who will introduce today's panelists. Dr. Thurston.
Thank you, Nathan. And I appreciate your support for this panel discussion on such an important topic. I know that many of us have personal stories of the impact of 9/11 on our families, friends, and acquaintances, but far fewer of us have firsthand experience responding to the disaster and working to make sure that it does not happen again, or if it does, that we are prepared to respond. And that is the topic of the discussion today. I've asked each of the panelists to respond to 3 questions. The first is to explain a little bit about what they did on 9/11 and to think back on their experience that day. Then we will move to the second question, which focuses on how the emergency services have changed in the past 20 years. Finally, we will discuss the future and what, from their perspective, still needs to be done to help keep the city and the country safe. We'll try to spend about 10 minutes on each question so that we can leave time at the end for questions and answers. So now I just want to briefly introduce our panelists. Many of you know Gennaro Bonfiglio, who teaches courses in emergency management and terrorism. I asked Gennaro if he'd be willing to help set up this panel, and he agreed. Chief Bonfiglio is battalion chief in the fire department in New York, hazardous materials battalion, and he serves as the battalion commander. He's also a faculty lecturer at Empire State. Gennaro has 40 years of service in the FDNY and a total of 43 years working for New York City. He got his start working for the New York Health and Hospitals Corporation for a little over 3 years at Bellevue before he joined the FDNY. And Gennaro lives in Orange County with his extended family. Mr. Joseph Nugent retired from the NYPD as a police lieutenant in special operations in 2005 and moved over to be the NYPD liaison to New York City Transit. Joe's duties include facilitating communication between NYPD, New York City Transit, Metro Transit Authority, the District Attorney's Office, and the Inspector General. None of that sounds difficult to me. Some of his duties include building security short and long-term security strategies for bus and subway operations. Joe was an Empire State adjunct professor for several years at the Metro Center in Staten Island in the Emergency Management Residency. And Joe lives in Brooklyn with his family. And finally, our third panelist is Chief Michael Masucci. Chief Masucci is a Deputy Assistant Chief in the New York City Fire Department with over 30 years of service. Currently, he's serving as the fire department's uniform personnel director, where he oversees assignments of firefighters from the Division of Training to units in the field, transfers, leave requests, retirement papers, among other administrative tasks. Mike graduated from SUNY Empire in November 2019, and he lives in Brooklyn with his family. So thank you all for joining me today, and let's just go ahead and start off. Our first question is just to tell us a little bit about that day on 9/11, where you were, what you did, and what it's like to think back on that particular experience. Gennaro, do you want to go first?
Yes, I'll go first. Yeah, actually on September 11th, 2001, I was off duty that day, and I was the captain of an engine company in Brooklyn, Engine 323, which is located in Mill Basin. We were watching, myself and my wife were watching television, and we saw the news report that a small plane had struck one of the towers in the World Trade Center, and that was right off the bat, felt very alarming because it was a perfectly clear day. It just seemed inexplicable that could happen with perfect weather conditions. So we kept our eye on the TV, and then within 5 to 7 minutes later, a second plane struck the South Tower, and then I immediately knew that we were going to be getting called into work because I felt we were under attack, some kind of a terror attack, which was quite obvious. And within minutes, the telephone rang. It was the New York City Fire Department calling me in to institute a total recall of all the members in the entire department. I reported to my command, which is only 3 blocks from where I lived at the time, and basically waited for the rest of my members to show up at the firehouse. And we got transported by a bus to our division, which was downtown Brooklyn in Brownsville, and then ultimately by about an hour or so after the second tower collapsed, we were walking down Broadway to begin operations at the World Trade Center site. And I wind up staying the entire day there till the following morning, trying to put out fires, trying to find people that were trapped, and things of that nature, other jobs, as we were over.
Gennaro, you're muted again. Could you please unmute your microphone? There you go.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so I was there for 24 hours, and the next day I was relieved at 9:30 and went back to my command in Brooklyn and continued on working for another 24 hours.
Thank you. Mike or Joe?
You want to go first?
I'll go, I guess. Okay, so on 9/11, it's funny that you can think back 20 years and know exactly what you did on that day. I couldn't tell you what I did on September 9th. I could tell you partially what I did on September 10th, but for September 11th, I could probably tell you exactly what I did the entire day because it was so unforgettable, the events that occurred. So I was actually, I walked out of my home, and I live in Marine Park, Brooklyn. And I remember saying to myself, what a gorgeous day. There's not a cloud in the sky. But I looked up to the left, and from my porch, if you stood up on the wall, you could see the trade centers. And I did see a black cloud in the sky at that time that I thought was smoke, but I wasn't sure. I was on my way to go to a place called Fire Tech, where you go to study to be an officer and get promoted in the fire department. I was a lieutenant at the time, covering in the 11th Division, which is South Brooklyn, which incorporates from like Red Hook to Park Slope up to maybe Long Island City. So I got in the car, I heard on the radio a plane had hit the World Trade Center. And I said the same thing that Chief Bonfiglio said. How is that possible on such a clear day? I assumed it was a small, maybe a small private plane. I was going over the Verrazano Bridge a few minutes right after the second plane had hit, and I could see the towers. And I said to myself, this is no accident. This is terrorism. And boy, do we have a big problem. So I got to where I was going in Staten Island. That was all canceled, of course. And everyone left, and we headed to get to Manhattan. I arrived at the Trade Center site probably an hour or two, maybe an hour and a half after the second tower had already collapsed. And it was just total devastation. I never saw anything like it in my life, of course. On my way there, I was actually quite frightened thinking about what I might see, what I was going to witness. And again, there was just so much devastation. We were actually almost helpless. There was so much to do, and we didn't have the equipment or the manpower to do it all. I remember one of the things I thought of the most was 210-story buildings had just fallen, and there was nothing tangible. It was just steel and dust. There were no desks, no phones, no office furniture, no file cabinets, just dust, steel, and paper. And like Chief Bonfiglio, you just kept moving from place to place throughout the site, doing different things, putting out fires, assisting companies to get water to tower ladders, searching for victims, which I didn't find any live victims that day. Probably around midnight, I remember taking a walk, just down Chamber Street, which is the the eastern side of the Trade Center site, and the devastation was unbelievable. And then earlier that evening, also Tower 7 had fallen, and I had never witnessed anything like that in my life either. A 51-story office building just collapsing. I stayed at the site probably till about 6 in the morning. I got home by getting a ride in a police car back to Brooklyn. I took a shower and then went back to the site, which I spent probably another 24 hours there. And in the course of the next several weeks, probably almost every other day or every time I was coming to work, I was at the site. So that's my experience with the day.
Thank you. Joe?
To echo what the two chiefs had said, as far as the day being phenomenal, blue sky, couldn't ask for a nicer day. I was a lieutenant in the NYPD Transit Bureau. I was assigned to Special Operations, and we basically did anything that didn't fall into plain patrol. Everything above and beyond uniform patrol, we were responsible for that. And most of our units didn't work. Most of the shifts are 8 to 4, 4 to 12, 12 to 8. We worked we called it a fifth platoon, like a 11 to 7 p.m. kind of shift. So I was in early that day. Immediately in the office, turned the TVs on, and I knew my folks were coming in. So what we started doing is the minute we got a supervisor in 8, we call it a 1 and 8 in the police department. That's an amount of people that could be moved efficiently. The NYPD has vans. 12 passenger vans, but it fits nicely, 1 and 8, and then you have a unit you can be responsible for, put them on a roster. And so as the officers were arriving, some of them had no clue, some of them did, had the radio on and whatnot in their vehicles. As soon as they got in, we started dispatching them down to the site. The minute all of them were to the trade center, they had already fallen. Again, like the chief had mentioned a second ago, it looked like a blizzard. It really did. It looked like a blizzard, and you were walking in snow up to your ankles, past your ankles. It was very, very eerie. It was very, very quiet. Can't describe it. A smell. There was a smell of, the best way I could describe it is if you light a match and blow the match out, it's the smell of sulfur. That's what sticks in my head that day, sulfur. You did hear the firemen and the members of the FDNY. I might be using the wrong terminology. I'm not in the fire department, but they have an alarm that if they stay still for too long, that alarm beeps. And that was an eerie, eerie sound that you heard their alarms. Their alarms were going off. And because many men had perished, and so knowing that was speaking volumes. The other thing too I remember was not a stapler, not a tape dispenser, a binder, nothing. The officers, we immediately got to the pile. We started working on the pile, worked continuously. I want to say 24, 30 hours, give or take. Then we started sending guys home, forcing some guys to go home. They didn't want to go home. And then getting into a 12-hour shift, 12 on, 12 off for many, many months. But the other thing that was eerie was I had come to a realization: the sun's going to go down today, and it's going to get dark, and there was no power in Lower Manhattan. So that was very scary. And then what you saw was floating embers, burning floating embers, almost like fireflies, like lightning bugs. And they were floating. And like the chiefs had said, just they would land in a pile of paper and a little fire would kick up. And you'd step on it or it would get extinguished and it would start up in another location. It was, like I said, the sounds, the smell, it brings you right back to that day. And again, a lot of ambulances, fire, police, rescue, and there wasn't really anybody to rescue, which was very, very disheartening. But that's where I was that day.
Thank you. That's really an incredible description of what the emergency services, the police and fire department were met with when they got there. So this next question for the three of you is, in the 20 years since, it just seems like a long time, but at the same time, it feels like yesterday. What were some of the major changes that you saw that have in the fire department, in the NYPD, with regards to, counterterrorism, or really anything? What are some of the big changes that you've seen? We'll start with Gennaro, and then we'll go to Mike, and then to Joe.
Hi. From my recollection, there was an adage when I was a young firefighter in 1981, and that feeling sort of lasted for many years. And that adage was, the job is fire. And that's all we were really dispatched to. All we were concerned about. We weren't so interested in emergencies or anything like that, any kind of activities that had to do with terrorism, because that really wasn't our purview. We weren't law enforcement. We were just involved with putting out fires and maybe other emergencies that the public called us out to. After September 11th, and of course, there was, I think, one of the problems with our emergency services was that there were silos. I mean, the police department, they had their intelligence, and they did their thing, and they kept information sharing to a minimum with other agencies. The fire department did it as well. The FBI, CIA, all these agencies, all the government agencies, they really weren't able to share information, I guess, for reasons that, I really can't explain at this point. we didn't really cooperate and collaborate with each other. And after September 11th, after the attacks, the change that I witnessed was an influx of, from the federal government down to the state and local governments, influx of money for training. We in the fire service get sent to schools throughout the country to learn about bomb school. We learn about chemical weapons, biological weapons, radiation weapons, you name it. And the federal government foots the bill for that. So we're highly trained. We're not just firefighters. We respond to emergencies. We respond to the subways for, terror, attacks, and the gamut of anything that happens. When someone picks up a phone and dials in New York City for any kind of problem, there's a good chance the fire department will be there. And I think the level of cooperation between the police and the fire service and EMS is probably the best it's ever been, because we have to either get better at what we do and cooperate and work together, or we're not going to be as effective in serving the citizens of New York City. So that's a big change, I think, that I could, has been very heartening to see. And I'm very glad that we got this change, but at a great cost.
Mike?
Okay, yes. So basically, my answer will be very similar to Jerry's answer, because we're both in the same service. But the fire department was decimated on that day, and we had to rebuild. I mean, the equipment we lost, and the amount of work that went into rebuilding this department was phenomenal, that we were able to rebuild in such a short time. And that just goes to the outstanding membership of this department. When something needs to get done, the New York City Fire Department gets it done. But like Jerry said, we did get a tremendous influx of money from the Department of Homeland Security, and we built out our organization to where we're probably the most capable and most ready fire department in the world now for terrorism events. From the very top right down to the units in the field. Every unit has now radiation detection equipment on their apparatus. Our special operations commands have all types of radiation detection. As Jerry works for the hazmat battalion, they've been trained to the top level for chemical and biological terrorism. I myself have attended 2 courses out in New Mexico related to terrorism and bombs, and bombs for like truck bombs, car bombings, improvised explosive devices, suicide bombing. All the chiefs in the fire department are trained in that. We have bulletins and documents written now on subway possibility terrorism events in subways. We have SOPs on all of that. We developed actually in the fire department the Center for Disaster Terrorism and Preparedness. That is a bureau now that collaborates with all the NYPD, the FBI, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Chiefs in that part of that bureau are cleared to top level clearance for your eyes only information. I don't know if you remember the battalion chief, who was the first battalion chief who responded on 9/11 when they were taking the documentary film of the plane flying into the building. They just happened to be out filming a gas emergency. That was Chief Pfeiffer. He actually became a staff chief, and he was the head of that bureau until he retired about 2 years ago. And now we have another chief, Chief Correo, who runs the Center for Disaster Terrorism Preparedness. It's just we've tried not to have the lack of imagination that we had back then, because that's what we lacked. We didn't see what was coming, because we couldn't fathom that they would be so technical and get this done. That we are aware of all of this. Now we work with NYPD. We have groups that would actually go to a terrorist event and work with the NYPD to rescue people that were injured once they clear the scene. We have all of that we work collectively with the Special Operations Command, the PD. So we've come a long, long way since 9/11. We're much more ready and well and trained for something, God forbid, to that extent again.
Great, thank you. Joe, over to you.
I have to again echo, that's what happens when you go last. You got to come up with some original ideas when they get stolen from you. No, in all seriousness, the point to agree with and echo the chiefs what they had said was prior to 9/11. I'd say that the NYPD and FDNY had a bit of a not adversarial, but competitive. Competitive is probably a better word. Very competitive type relationship, and it did not help the public at all. And I used to use an example: if you're in a vehicle and the vehicle flips over, and you're trapped and the vehicle's leaking gasoline and you're seeing smoke and sparks, and you don't care if that individual is police, fire, EMS, you don't care if they're paid, unpaid, volunteered, doctor, nurse, you want someone to get you out of that bad situation that you're in. And one of the things that has definitely gotten so much better over the years since 9/11 is the communication, the cooperation, the interagency drills, that the public in general definitely benefits by, and the departments benefit by. Everybody has a different core competency, so kind of strengthen each other and support each other, work closely with each other. So that is definitely one of the things, like Gennaro had said, influx of money, and like Mike had said about the thinking outside the box. If someone said to you on September 10th, they're going to hijack planes, they're going to slam them into the buildings, and the buildings are going to collapse, you would say, okay, what are you drinking? What are you smoking? You know, what are you on? Type thing. It's beyond absurd. And so it forced us to start thinking outside of the box. And one of the major vulnerabilities that we have in the subway system is a lot of tunnels go underwater, under bodies of water. And if someone was to, God forbid, do some harm to a tunnel and that was breached, the damage that would be done would be insurmountable. So we put Omega booths at the ends of the tunnels, alarms, intrusion, laser intrusion. Canine dogs were expanded, and the amount of patrols have been increased. They're called EDC dogs, explosive detection canines, or vapor wake dogs. They can pick up the scent if someone was to carry explosives. They're on the subway system. And one interesting connection, I think the chiefs probably know this already, that I thought that one of the other vulnerabilities that we have are emergency exits. And if you're ever walking down the street and you see a metal grate in a sidewalk, it's painted yellow, it says don't stand on it, please keep clear, or something to that effect. Well, they could be opened and breached with not much effort. And after 9/11, we started thinking outside the box, and we installed a lock that's it's very difficult to get in unless you have the proper equipment. And the history behind that lock is the member of the fire department, firefighter William Johnston. He passed away on 9/11, and he worked for transit. He was an iron worker, track worker before he went to the fire department. Well, his dad worked for us, and his dad designed this lock with a special wrench, and we call that still to today. That's the Johnston lock, and it's called the Billy Bar because his first name was William. So we still to today use the Billy Bar to open the Johnston lock. So it's just those kind of things that constantly remind you why we're here, what we're doing, and we need to continue to do and get better every day.
That's great. It's very heartening to hear the cooperation that has taken place. You know, I was working in Washington, D.C., both prior and after 9/11, and we saw the same thing, especially within the intelligence community, just a lot more higher level of cooperation. So that's great to hear. And I know that even though, we've all had these successes in the last 20 years in more collaboration, I know there's always more that needs to be done. And so this last question is just from your perspective. You've had and all of you have had long careers in these services. Think about you know, if you're going to talk to some younger folks coming in, maybe who were not around at 9/11, what are the next steps, or what still needs to be done in your estimate? Gennaro?
Hi. Yeah, I would say certainly the continued cooperation, what we've seen for the last 20 years, to have that continue. I mean, let's not keep our, take our eye off the ball here. I think the country responded effectively to what happened, and with the passage of time and with the fact that terror attacks on our shores have not been as large in scope as the World Trade Center attack. There's been a lot lesser attacks. We have a tendency to become complacent. So I think it would be great if all of us could keep our, eyes on the ball and remember that this could happen again. Because if we, if our security and our intelligence agencies, become less concerned about that, and there's a monetary factor to it and all, we could be vulnerable for another attack. And as far as what I would tell young firefighters, young police recruits, EMS workers, anybody in the intelligence community, I think we have to probably brainstorm and talk about scenarios. What kind of scenarios could develop? And we have this counter terrorism unit in the fire department, fire service at Fort Totten, and a lot of their work is devoted to trying to devise any type of possibilities of what kind of terror attacks could we expect in the future, because we sort of shut down the specter of a plane crashing into a building. I mean, it's not to say that it can never happen again, but it's much more difficult. So we have vulnerabilities, like Joe said, in the subways. We have vulnerabilities on our waterways, because let's face it, New York City is surrounded by water for the most part of it. So we could have a problem with maybe ships coming in or small, fast boats, that kind of thing. And, we have to just continue to train, work with other agencies, share information, and keep our fingers crossed, I guess.
Thanks for that. Mike?
Yeah, well, just to expand on what Jerry said, we have to remain vigilant. We can't let the time that has passed without a significant incident let us be forgetful of what occurred. I mean, we did have the Times Square bombing several years ago, and thanks to our training on our vigilance, the first new officer at that scene recognized the scene as a possible bomb in that vehicle and held everybody back, and the outcome was favorable where it could have been disastrous. I mean, it was right outside the theater and the hotel in Manhattan, and they said that bomb had the ability to cause severe damage and loss of life. So right there, we proved ourselves that our training did, that was about 7 or 8 years after the Trade Center, that it is being, helpful. And the new firefighters coming on, we have to continue to train them and make them vigilant. My son is now on the job. So he was 9 years old during the 9/11. So he didn't have the real experience back then of the day, because he was a child, and he couldn't really fully grasp what was happening. So he has to be mindful of what occurred in the fire department and take his training seriously, and be aware of what could possibly happen. And we have to continue this, and we can't stop, because you never know what is being planned. It's been 20 years. A lot of people said the anniversary is possibly where we're going to see something. There's heightened awareness. There was some credible threats, but they didn't come out to fruition, or nothing occurred, thank God. But we can't let down our guard, and we can't stop our cooperation with the other city agencies, with the federal agencies. Hopefully, the Department of Homeland Security will continue to fund and our grant asks, and we can continue to build out our department and protect the citizens of New York. And hopefully that we will, in the whole process, not see a loss of life due to terrorist events.
Great, thank you. And Joe.
You can't sustain a heightened, ultra level of heightened awareness constantly. You can't sustain that. It just, whether it be money or personnel or just people's ability to like be on guard, so to speak. You can't maintain like I said, the highest level of heightened alert, but we can come down a notch. We can come down a notch or two from that, like Gennaro had said, not becoming complacent, not taking things for granted. I think former police commissioner Ray Kelly, I think it was his quote that I like to use, that he said, we, meaning, emergency responders, law enforcement, city, state, federal, fire service, we have to get it right all the time. They only have to get it right once. So there's little tests that are taking place every single day. They are trying, they're poking, they are prodding. If someone's taking a sketch of a sensitive location, someone's taking photographs that aren't, let's say, tourist in nature, if someone is, just watching the guards, and when do the security guards change? When do their shifts change? When does it go to lunch? Those types of things that are out of the ordinary. Protecting blueprints, schematics of buildings. The humans are good at taking shortcuts, and we could put in the best locks and the best technology and biometrics and iris scans and thumb scans, palm prints, and we'll get someone that likes to smoke a cigarette and I'll go out that door that costs thousands and thousands of dollars, the technology that went into putting that door in, and they'll prop a box or a brick or something in the door, prop the door open and sneak out the side door and have a cigarette. And I used to joke, the NYPD has a counterterrorism location out in Coney Island. It's an undisclosed, which is kind of silly at times because the parking lot's filled with marked vehicles, but it's supposed to be like the Bat Cave, and high level security location. And there's the men and women, putting a rock in the side door and standing outside and smoking a cigarette. So we can't let our guard down. We can't. Complacency is going to hurt us. Complacency, people are going to get hurt. People are going to die. And the good thing is, like the two chiefs previously had said, the funding helps with tabletop drills, with full-scale drills, real drills. I constantly make available. We have an abandoned subway station, trains. We let the emergency services come down, train in a real life scenario, a real subway station. The power's on the third rail, move the train in, move the train out, and those kind of things. So that certainly helps because I'm a former Marine, and in boot camp they used to say, the more we sweat in peace, the less we bleed in war. And it's a very, very true statement that the more we practice, the better we get at it, and then hopefully prevent something ever happening again.
Thank you. That's really remarkable, and it always makes me hopeful when I hear how much people depend on training. And then in my experience working for the government and the military, it's usually training that is cut first. So it's something to remember, the importance of training and education and learning and being vigilant. So thank you for that. And I think now, Janet, I think we can go to some questions. Do we have any from the audience?
So we did have one question about where this recording will be posted. It's not specific, of course, to the topic that we're discussing, but we will be posting a recording of today's event on our social media channels, so it will be out there. But we don't have any questions specific to the subject area. So this is a good opportunity, folks, if you have any questions or comments, to raise your hand or put your questions or comments in the chat. Okay, we have a question from Chris Wan. Chris, do you want to turn on your microphone and video and ask your question?
Sure, thank you very much. It's kind of interesting that you're several of you have talked about training, and I was really reminded of the importance of this. Just yesterday, there was a flight instructor leaving West Point who got too close to the George Washington Bridge, and there's a temporary flight restriction in that area, and they sent the Air Force sent a fighter jet and escorted him out of the area. How often do you see, or do your colleagues see those kinds of not even deliberate kind of provocations, but just sort of stupid things that you then have to respond to effectively, just, in the course of sort of normal business? I was hearing the stories about somebody just goes out to smoke a cigarette, props the door open. That's not a major violation, but it has the potential to really become a serious problem. And so, like, how often do you see that kind of thing in the course of daily business? Thank you for letting me ask my question.
I'll jump in since he kind of directed the question towards me. I think probably every day somebody's doing. There's an expression, you can't fix stupid. People do things all the time, but you just kind of have to. The law enforcement side of it has to figure out, was it just a dumb mistake? Was it just a silly mistake? Was it someone being absent-minded? The person that's just wandering around? Because if you walk in a hospital, just walk in a hospital, walk in like you own the place, walk in like you work there, walk around, wave to the security guard, how you doing? You'll probably you could get into X-ray or surgery or the ICU unit. But when you tiptoe around and you walk around like you're a tourist and you're there for the first time and you're not sure of yourself and you're kind of staring up and around, someone's going to say, "Excuse me, sir, can I help you? Do you need help? What are you doing?" So it's that constant engaging of those types of individuals and find out, is it an innocent mistake? Is it is something else behind that? That they call it like boundary probing. Like, let me see how far I can get. Let me see how far I can go before I get challenged. And it's those types of things. That's why the layered approach always works. That if your first line security guard in the lobby doesn't get them, well, now they get up to the floor, the executive floor. Hopefully they can't get in. Hopefully they're locked out. They're in the lobby where the elevators are. And now if an employee goes in, an employee doesn't say, "Hold the door for them," and say, "Oh yeah, sure, let me hold the door for you and let you right in." So it's those kind of things. But frequency, I would say, pretty often. I don't know how the fire chiefs feel about it in their line of work, but I'd say pretty frequently.
Thank you. That was really helpful. I'd appreciate hearing from others if you have feedback.
Well, to answer your question, we probably see it in the fire service a little less than the police see it, because we're not probably called to those situations where something might look not right. But since 9/11, myself and many of the firefighters and fire officers, we've been trained to a heightened awareness. So after 9/11, I got promoted to battalion chief. I went to Manhattan. I spent 12 years up on the Upper East Side, and it's a high-profile area. And I had numerous incidents where we thought we had something. Like we'll go to an apartment for a gas leak, and we'll see something. I'm not going to get too elaborate of what we see because I don't want to give anybody ideas. I don't know how much is going to be broadcast later on in this. But then we would turn it over to our marshals, and they would do the investigations with PD to see if there was any terrorist activity going on at this occupancy. I can't tell you how many times after 9/11 we went to white powder incidents, standing fast with PD and our hazardous materials where they made the assessments, bomb scares, numerous. It's almost like a daily occurrence in Manhattan. It happens so often that it's not really newsworthy because it's just but numerous suitcases left on the street, briefcases left on the street, which all turn out to be the majority of the time nothing. But that's like you were saying, people's mistakes. Somebody goes to a payphone that they don't really use many payphones anymore, puts their bag down and forgets it there. Now, in the Upper East Side of Manhattan or Midtown Manhattan, that's a big thing. An unattended package, right? Same thing in the subways. So yeah, We don't see it as much as PD, but once it became an incident, we were called to the scene and we worked with PD till it was mitigated. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cathryn, we have a gentleman with his hand up in the chat. Mike Justin. Mike, are you able to turn on your mic and your video?
Hi, I'm actually driving right now, so can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please don't turn on your video.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, I was definitely not an officer in the NYPD or fire department at that time. I was just a paramedic, and I do remember when we responded that day 20 years ago that we had a huge issue with communication, radio communication, etc., emergency communication. So my question is, to the panel, since you've spent a considerable amount of time post the event, do you feel like there has been a huge boost in the emergency communication infrastructure since 9/11?
I'll take that question. I believe there's been a quantum leap in the improvement of communication since 9/11, the attacks. On the fire scene, the handy talkies, every member of the fire department carries a portable radio on them, and there were hundreds inside the buildings that were unable to hear the radio transmissions from the street. There was a documentary on TV like last week with Joe Pfeiffer, the chief in charge. He was the first arriving battalion chief, and there was very bad communications. And I think part of the reason was because there was a thing called a high-rise repeater system. It's an antenna that went up both of the trade towers. It's a hardwired antenna that goes up into the top, from the bottom up to the top of the building. And when the planes crashed into the building, the equipment was damaged, and that sort of basically what happens when somebody makes a message from the street level, the message is repeated on the upper floors of the building. It travels through the hardwire antenna, and then it's repeated. So the planes obviously damaged the equipment, and so communications from the first floor to, say, the 70th floor was damaged, and a lot of times people didn't hear the calls to evacuate the building, and others chose to just continue rescuing people. I mean, so there was two different things going on. It's difficult to walk away from a human being that's in need of assistance. So, but suffice it to say, the communications could have been better. And since 9/11, there's been 2 or 3 different radio systems that have come down the pike, and they continually get better. We have digital radios now where the transmissions are clearer, more reliable, and no doubt there's been a big difference. As far as infrastructure is always getting better. I mean, there's cell phone towers, there's more equipment being put up, throughout the city. We're constantly looking to improve our communications. Joe works in the subways, and we have communication equipment now that's sort of where communications between the street level and the subway used to be terrible. We used to have to set up a relay system where one person would call the next person, the next closest person, and then he'd call the next closest person, and eventually get to where the emergency was. Now we could actually call directly from street level to, say, inside a tunnel because of the improvements in equipment. So there has definitely been a vast leap in the equipment that has made our radio communications better, although not perfect. There's always room for improvement.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So Cathryn, we have a number of notes of thanks in the chat, and then some questions, but the notes of thanks are very important, and I just want to read them. So we've got a thank you for sharing your experiences. It has been very sobering and very enlightening. Thank you for your service. No questions. I want to thank all of you for your service and bravery that awful day and every day since. Grateful. Thank you for your service and for being here. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for your service and your bravery. I am eternally grateful to those of you who keep us safe. Thank you for all that you do in protecting us and your bravery. And then I am incredibly grateful. Thank you for sharing your experiences. So lots of powerful notes of thanks in the chat. There is a question from a Mariah DeSorbo, and Mariah says, what sort of difficulties did you guys encounter when it came to short-term recovery, like with rubble removal or securing the site?
I'll grab that one, I guess. It became a magnet for curiosity seekers, people that wanted to go down, people that wanted to take photographs. So one thing that was key was defining a clear line, delineating a perimeter, and having both NYPD as well as the military, the National Guard. They were deployed. It took them a little while to get formed up and assigned down there, but then they took over the perimeter. Security was checked, credentials were checked, just because there was talk of people wanting to loot, go in and steal, and there was talk of all kind of people looking for souvenirs and whatever motivations people might have. But it was a crime scene. It was I don't know how many square miles. It was a crime scene, and it needed to be protected and secured, and the people, the comings and goings, controlled. It was what was this? There was a second part of the question. Was she talking about equipment? I missed that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. She says, what sort of difficulties did you encounter when it came to short-term recovery, like with rubble removal and securing the site? So you got the securing the site, I believe.
I mean, there was a story. I don't know how much media attention it got. There was talk of, as some of the steel was removed, the steel was put in the back of trucks, and the trucks didn't arrive where they were supposed to be going. That some of the steel possibly fell off the truck, so to speak, and there was some issues with that, but that was quickly corrected and handled appropriately. But it was a mountain of debris, as you can well understand and see, and from videos and photos. You had 210-story buildings that were now a tremendous pile of rubble, and it had to be carefully sifted through, and for possible people that were recovered, and it was tough, but hopefully I answered the question. I don't know if I fully answered the question.
I think you did. We have a few more questions in the chat, and then my friend Amy Ruth Tobel has her hand up. So what I'll do is read one more question from the chat, then I'll call on Amy, and she will get the last word, if that's all right with Cathryn. Okay, so the question that I'm going to read from the chat is from Rachel Garrett. We have about 6 minutes left. Rachel says, thank you for your service. As you have brand new people coming into the agencies who perhaps are in their 20s and were children when 9/11 happened, how do you convey the urgency of staying collaborative? How do you prevent silos and rivalries from building up again?
I would say, from my experience, I think we military, with the police department, the sanitation, the Department of Environmental Protection, any agency any stakeholding agency in New York City, you can bet there's going to be some kind of training, across agency training, multiple times a year, where we get to meet our fellow emergency workers, say hello, introduce ourselves, shake their hands, and work together side by side. And in doing that, on game day, when we are all responding in an emergency, we might see the same people we trained with, say, the week previously and all, and it's very easy to just have a comfortable feeling to just say, hey, let's go. Hey, come on, Joe, let's go. We talked about this last week. We have a game plan for this emergency. So definitely collaboration, close contact, and don't be ashamed to reach out. And like I said, just as far as having these silos that we used to have, where everybody kept information secret, we share information with everybody else. And I think largely there's a lot of cooperation going on. I really can't say anything, more about how good it's been compared to the way it used to be.
Thanks, Gennaro. Amy Ruth, you've been waiting a while. Want to turn on your mic and your camera if you have it?
Sure. Hi. So first of all, I am forever grateful to the three of you and everybody in emergency services. We're alive in many cases because of you, and I think we're just incredibly grateful. Just a little context, I lived in Brooklyn, and on 9/11, all of the debris from the World Trade Center fell in my neighborhood. We lost most of our fire department. And after the site was secured, I had so many students in NYPD and FDNY and EMT workers that I spent a lot of my days really just patrolling the perimeter, seeing students, telling them I was here to help, because as a resident in the area, you really felt very helpless and like you needed to participate in some way. So I have two questions, and feel free for each of you to respond to one or the other. The first one is is a little bit more personal. 9/11 changed my life. As a resident in a relatively secure environment, this was all new for me. And so there were a lot of things about my life that changed. And I wondered if there were things about your lives that changed after that day. And a little more academic question is that the FBI has noted that there really are more threats recently from domestic terrorist groups or individuals than from international groups. And I wonder if this fact or these facts really affect your approaches to readiness at all. And thank you again for saving my life, really.
I'll jump in if you don't mind, real quick. As far as personal, I'm a cancer survivor now as a result of 9/11. And that's one thing that a lot of people are tending to forget about, and hopefully they don't. Things like the Victims' Compensation Fund and the 9/11 World Trade Center Registry, because the damage that was done that day, it's still paying the terrorist dividends. People are still getting sick. People are still dying. Things is showing up that the medical field has never seen. And these things should appear in 80-year-old people, and they're appearing in 30 and 40 and 50-year-old people. So that's one thing that, as far as a personal takeaway from this, and it's I don't know. Jenny, you want to, or Mike?
Yeah, so like Joe was saying, it is I can honestly say probably that there isn't a day in this past 20 years that somewhere during my day I don't think back to that day for something jars my memory. Being in the fire service, I mean, we do talk about it all the time. In my office here, I have a lot of 9/11 memorabilia, the things dedicated to the members lost and stuff. So you think about it every day. Of course, as you go through this time of the year, all the TV shows, all the documentaries, they are upsetting. I mean, I'm sure every member of this department that was there that day has some form of PTSD, but we don't take it to the level of where it stops us from performing our jobs or disabling us. I've had some medical issues myself, thank God, not as serious as his, that I've been treated for. And the fire department has come a long way. We actually have now, every year, we get every member who was there has a World Trade Center medical to follow our health and our well-being. I'm registered with the registry also, and help of God, I don't ever need the services any further than what I've had. But the day the fire department, we rely now on our intelligence from the police department, from the FBI, to keep us informed through that bureau, which I said, the Center for Disaster Terrorism and Preparedness, where we do have chiefs in this department who have ultra high security level clearance. And we just hopefully, like you said, they're on top of the domestic terrorists as much as they are as the foreign. And I think they do a fantastic job. And as he mentioned before, when I was a new battalion chief, probably in like 2007, 2008, I did go to a tabletop exercise at that Coney Island facility. And I was a fireman in Coney Island for 9 years before I got promoted to lieutenant. And we passed that building every day, and I had no idea what it was. I never saw those marked cars. But when I went to that tabletop, I was amazed by what was inside that building and the technology that had been incorporated, I guess, post 9/11 too, to keep the city safe. And they do a fantastic job, the NYPD. They really do.
That's
Thank
great.
you, Shima.
Thank you all so much for attending, and thank you, Gennaro, Mike, and Joe, for your thoughtful comments and answers to all of the questions. And to wrap this up, I'm going to turn it over to Janet.
So I'll just echo what Cathryn said. Thank you so much to Chiefs Bonfiglio and Matsucci and Lieutenant Nugent. We really appreciate you coming and sharing your powerful stories. My apologies to those of you who had questions in the chat or who raised your hand I was not able to call on, but we really appreciate the attendance that you are all here and the conversation that we've had here today. Have a wonderful afternoon.